What if everything you know about Day of the Dead is a lie? The vibrant altars, the dancing skeletons, the celebration of death itself. All of it traces back to enslaved Africans who were forbidden from practicing their own rituals. But what happened next changed everything. Stay with me for the next 3 minutes to uncover the buried truth. 1519. Spanish conquistadors didn't just bring disease and destruction to Mexico, they brought over 200,000 enslaved Africans, more than they brought to the United States. These weren't just laborers, they were spiritual leaders, healers, keepers of ancient death rituals. From Senegal, Ghana, Angola, they carried sacred traditions across the Atlantic. Spanish missionaries tried to crush these beliefs, but they underestimated African ingenuity. What the Africans did next was brilliant. They hid their ancestor worship in plain sight, but the Spanish had no idea what was really happening. The fusion that followed would reshape Mexican culture forever. Indigenous, African, and Spanish traditions began to merge in ways no one expected, and at the center of it all was humanity's oldest obsession, death itself. What happened next will shock you. Meet Yanga, an African spiritual leader who arrived in Veracruz in 1570. By day, he worked the sugar plantations. By night, he preserved the sacred. African death rituals weren't just about mourning, they were about power. Communicating with ancestors meant accessing wisdom, protection, guidance. But Spanish patrols were everywhere hunting for pagan practices. So Yanga did something genius. He disguised African ancestor veneration as Catholic saint worship. To Spanish eyes, they were praying to Saint Peter. In reality, they honored Yoruba ancestors. But here's where it gets incredible. Indigenous Mexicans were doing the exact same thing. Aztec death festivals honored Mictlantecutli, lord of the underworld. When African and indigenous death traditions met, something magical happened. African cowrie shells appeared on Aztec altars, Yoruba colors decorated Mayan skulls. By 1600, entire communities were celebrating death in ways that horrified Spanish priests. Church records described demonic festivals where the dead supposedly returned to earth. What they were witnessing was the birth of Day of the Dead as we know it. Those colorful skulls, African beadwork patterns, the marigold flowers, Yoruba sacred colors, the all-night cemetery vigils, pure African ancestor communion. But the Spanish weren't done trying to stop this. What happened next nearly erased this history forever. Here's what your history books tell you about Day of the Dead. A beautiful indigenous tradition that honors deceased family members. Zero mention of African influence. Zero mention of enslaved people's contributions. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. In 1692, the Spanish Inquisition launched a brutal campaign against Afro-Mexican spiritual practices. Thousands were arrested, tortured, executed for practicing witchcraft. Survivors went deeper underground, hiding their traditions within Catholic festivals. Colonial authorities rewrote the narrative, crediting only indigenous and Spanish influences. African spiritual artifacts were buried, destroyed, or hidden in church walls. For 300 years, this cover-up worked perfectly. Until 1990s, researchers started finding the buried evidence. African ritual objects in Mexican churches. Yoruba symbols on Aztec altars. Even DNA evidence proving 10% of modern Mexicans have African ancestry. The truth was hiding in plain sight all along. Every sugar skull tells the story of 3 cultures becoming one. But why does this matter today? The answer will surprise you. Today, 1.4 million Afro-Mexicans are finally being recognized after centuries of invisibility. They're reclaiming their ancestors' contributions to Mexican culture. Museums are finally displaying African artifacts alongside Aztec and Spanish pieces. Schools are teaching the complete history, not the sanitized version. Every Day of the Dead celebration is now a testament to African resilience and creativity. The skulls, the colors, the all-night vigils, all carrying forward 500 years of hidden African wisdom. When you see families honoring their dead, you're witnessing the triumph of enslaved people who refused to let their culture die. This is why buried history matters. It reveals the true richness of human culture. Every tradition you think you know has hidden depths waiting to be discovered. Day of the Dead isn't just Mexican, it's African, indigenous, Spanish, and beautifully human. The next time someone tells you they know the real history of anything, remember this story. Subscribe to uncover the truths they never teach you in school, because every culture has secrets worth discovering.